been on loan to Forest Lawn Baptist Church for quite a few weeks, and so it's good to have him back with us this morning for a little while. He stays busy, and so we were glad to see him and Shirley back with us this morning. And as Mickey mentioned this morning about Miss Shirley's brother passing away, and her mother passed away earlier this year, so we thank God for you guys and remember you in our prayers, and we love you so much. Do you remember, as a child possibly, that's usually when it happens, where someone asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up? Anybody? Okay. And you probably said a number of different things. And are many of you filling out what you said that day? Anybody, whatever you said to an adult teacher, whatever that day, are you actually doing what you said? Anybody? Glenda? Okay, good. Teacher. Okay. Well, you may not can read those up there, but here's some children who were asked that very question. Toby said he wanted to be a veterinarian to help pets get better. Great. Sophia said she wanted to be a baseball player because it's fun. Violet said she wanted to be a chef because she liked to cook. Isabella said she wanted to be a ballerina because she liked to dance. David wanted to be a fireman because he said, I like explosions and fire. Yeah. Lila said, I want to be a ballerina because I like when they dance. Anthony, he said, I want to be a jet flyer. They're cool. And then Albert said, I want to be a person who stays home and does nothing. I'm a little worried about David and Albert, aren't you? This past Friday afternoon, we had our daycare graduation here for our children, and they were asked that. Actually, they came up and shared with those of us in the congregation what they wanted to be, and I just shared 4 of them here with you today. One of them said they wanted to be Batman and Robin. One of them said they wanted to be a cowgirl. Another one a teacher, Glenda. And then the last one said she wanted to be a Supergirl. So, everybody has a dream of some sort, of some type, about what they want to do in life as a young person, as a child. And it's possible that those dreams have been forgotten or even abandoned over the years because just hasn't panned out as you thought it might. You've struggled with disappointments, yet the most difficult disappointment, I think, to deal with is when you have prayed about something, you prayed for a long time, it looks like God is finally going to answer your prayer concerning whatever that is, but then it doesn't happen. And I wonder then, is that's when our hopes are just dashed against the stones. It's times like that it's hard not to be disappointed. And it's really hard not to be disappointed with God because you begin questioning, you begin wondering, where is God at? Is He just simply playing a cruel game with my life? Is He really what I've been told that He is? If so, what's happening in my life? Why did He make it look like He was going to answer my prayer that I have been praying all these years, only to dash all my hopes? If it happens more than once, to protect yourself from further hurt, from further pain, you just quit praying about it and you quit hoping for it. Well, in honor of our grads this morning, I want to share one of my favorite narratives out of the Old Testament, out of a very familiar person that you know, Joseph. So if you want to take your Bibles and turn to Genesis 37, I'm going to share a few texts this morning concerning Joseph's life as we follow the narrative as close as possible. But I want to share at least 3 truths this morning to our graduates, and really to all of us in a sense, to follow your dream. In Genesis chapter 37, a very familiar story, beginning verse 5. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed still another dream, and told it to his brothers, and said, "Look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bow down to me." So he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you?" And look at verse 11. And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. First point, I think, concerning our dreams is this. You may be envied by others, considering whatever that dream is in your life. Joseph's brothers envied him. To envy, we know it means to be jealous of, to want what another has. It's that green-eyed monster that seems to come out in people's lives, and instead of being happy for someone of what they're being able to accomplish in life and what God is doing in their life, instead of being excited for them, we find ourselves, or some find themselves, criticizing and not wanting them to see, or not wanting to see them clearly get what they believe that they've shared in their heart. You share your dream with your family, you share it with your friends, and there's a possibility that somewhere in that mix, someone might start envying you. Here's the thing about envy, though. We can see some things in people's lives when they act toward us, but envy is something that's in the heart, and you cannot, you cannot always see envy. It's something that happens within a person, and you may never know. I don't believe Joseph knew at the time that his brothers were envious of him. He may not have gone back and gave the other dream. He may not have went out and sought his brothers if he knew that they were envious of him. And so there's something about this envy. But here's another idea you got to think about. It may not be a family member. It may not be someone else who is a friend. Satan is always trying to discourage God's children. He's always trying to do something to dash any hope, any fulfillment, any dream in your life. So he's going to bring discouragement into your life. He's going to bring fear. He's going to bring doubt. He's going to plant all these things in your mind, and he's going to make sure he puts some people in your pathway that's probably going to have this envy that's oohing out of them. And you and I must be aware of it. Graduates, you've got to be aware of it, that it may very well come upon your life. And how are you going to handle it? Number 2 is this. Take your Bibles and look at chapter 37. And let's look what happens here, beginning verse 18 of chapter 37. Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. This is, of course, if Joseph, his dad said, "Go out and see how your brothers are doing." So he's gone to find them. They saw him coming. In verse 19, then they said to one another, "Look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what would become of his dreams." But Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, "Let us not kill him." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father." So it came to pass, verse 23, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. Number 1, people will possibly envy you because of the dream you have in your life, no matter what it may be. And secondly, there are going to be delays. You may be delayed by others, by circumstances, by things. Joseph was delayed by his own brothers. I don't think any of them had any idea, and I know they didn't. I'm not even sure Joseph had any idea about the dreams that he shared with his brothers and with his father of what God was going to do. But here he was being delayed by his family. And certainly there are those probably in our families or our friends, or even certainly that foe, that Satan, the enemy who hates God's children with all of his might, that will try to send delays into our life. He's going to do everything possibly to trip you up and to keep you from experiencing the fullness of God's dream in your own life, of what God desires for you to do in life. And He's going to send these things. Don't you think it would have been, when you think about Joseph and all that he experienced with his brothers, just to give up? When his own brothers did this to him? But look at chapter 39, verses 6 through 18. Look at what happens here. Joseph is sold into slavery. He goes to Egypt. He goes to Potiphar's house. And look at what happens. He's in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar says, listen, looks like God is with you. I'm going to give you authority over my whole house. And Joseph was doing great, and then something happened in verse 6 of chapter 39. Thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, look, my master does not know what is with me in this house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So David resists that. But we all know what happens. Because she is resisted, she cannot handle that. When her husband comes home, she tells her husband that David's tried to rape her. And what happens? David is thrown into prison. So now he's been put into a pit by his own brothers. Now he's been thrown into prison for something he did not do. Excuse me. And while in prison, again, God's blessing seems to be upon him. And even the captain of the guard has put Joseph in charge of the prison area. And so we see something else that is happening. Chapter 39, verses 19 through 23. Listen. So it was when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did this to me. He was put into prison. Joseph is in prison at this time. And it came to pass in chapter 40 that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended the Lord. They were put into prison. We know the story. Joseph has become in charge, so to speak. He is walking through the prison one day, and he sees these two guys, and they're so sad looking, and he says, what's the problem? And they tell him, well, we've had dreams we can't understand. And so he explains the dreams to them. And then Joseph says this, remember me when we get out of this place. Remember me. Don't you think it would have been easy for Joseph just to say, it's just not worth it. I'm tired. I'm weary. Seems like every time I try to do something right, something bad happens. And I'm not sure I understand these dreams that I had. It seems like this delay after delay, problem after problem, just nothing seems to be happening right. It could be so very difficult to stay focused when things are happening that you just don't understand. This is where your faith in God must be the guiding force in your life. God was at work around Joseph. Whether Joseph identified it or not, God was at work. Look at chapter 39, verses 22 and 23, or even 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and He gave him favor in the light of the keeper of the prison. Verse 23, and the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. Don't look at delays as problems. I think we ought to really look at delays as preparations for what God is desiring to accomplish in our life. I really believe if your dream is from God, there is nothing that can keep it from taking place. You know, and I also think this. I think whatever we go through in life, good or bad, as a child of God, there's nothing that can happen in your life that catches God by surprise. And I think God allows things to happen in our lives. He allows us to go through difficulties and trying times. And we have a tendency to think that this time is just being wasted. But I don't believe that's happening. I think everything that we go through in life, God is using that to transform us. God is using that to prepare us to fulfill the greatest desire in our life. And that's for His glory and His glory alone. God is always preparing us. There's nothing that we can say, well, that doesn't work in my life. No, God can use anything and everything in our life for His glory as He is shaping us to accomplish what He wants us to do in life for His glory. And so, grads, hey, think about it. You might share your dreams with others, your family or friends, and you may not ever know that they envy you because what's in your heart. And they're really jealous of you because of what's going on in your life. Don't allow that to detour you. And even if you begin the journey, you're going to face some delays along the way. It's going to happen. Don't allow those delays, others, difficulties, problems, to keep you from staying focused and staying faithful. Why? Because I believe, just like it happened in Joseph's life, your dream will be fulfilled when? In God's timing. It's not your timing. It's God's timing. In chapter 41 and following, we see what's happening with Joseph. Get this. Joseph was 17 years old when he shared his dream with his family. He is now 30. 13 years have passed. Wow. That's high school. Right, Jeremy? Well, 12 at least. 13 for me, 12 for you. And Alex, how many years it's been for you to go through UNCW? Sometimes those things are just takes forever, it seems like. 13 years have passed. And now, what do we see in Joseph? I really believe what we see in Joseph's life as we look at him is Joseph is really blossoming where he's planted. He's not griping. He's not pouting. He's not complaining. He certainly seems to have no idea that all these things were going to take place, that he was going to be sold into slavery, that he was going to be lied against, that he was going to be put into prison. Certainly he had no idea, just like you and I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, even in the next few hours. We don't have a clue. Is God in control? Does He know what's happening? Or these circumstances just caught Him off guard? Now, if you're a child of God, He knows every single thing that's happening in your life. And He's got a purpose and a plan behind it. What is it? He's working it out for His glory. Don't get all out of contorts about it. Trust Him. Let Him guide you in life. He's got a plan, and He's going to work it out according to His will for your life. Because just like what's happened here, God said, I'm going to show you a favor. Because Joseph has just been living for God through all of this. And at some point, when he goes and sees this chief baker and the butler, and he tells them, he says, listen, remember me when you get out of here. Get this. He told them, remember me. They got out, or at least one of them did. 2 years pass. another wait. Am I ever going to get out of this place? Is this ever going to be over? And it wasn't until Pharaoh himself had a dream. And finally, when he had this dream, that the chief baker says, oh my. He said, I remember my thought this day. There's a young man in prison who answered our dreams. And Pharaoh, he can answer your dreams. And so here's something that's going to take place in his life, that Joseph finally gets a chance to come out of prison and to really accomplish great things for the kingdom of God. And there's something about Joseph that I want to point out to our grads today, and for all of us in a sense. I think it's very practical. Look at what Joseph does when he gets invited out of prison. Verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. And look what he does. He prepares himself, his appearance. He shaves. He changes his clothing because he's coming before Pharaoh. He is making himself presentable. There was a day, and I guess that day has passed, I don't know, when I know when most of us, as I look around, when we applied for a job, we always made sure we looked our best and we presented ourselves in that way. And we went to a person. I think a lot of people apply for jobs online these days. But still, there's something about that appearance when someone first sees us, because isn't that the lasting impression? Are y'all awake? Isn't that a lasting impression when someone sees you the first time, depending on what you look like? It is. It really is. So make sure when you go before someone, you really present yourself well before them. But secondly, I really think is probably the greatest, and that is his attitude. Look at what happens in verse 16. So Pharaoh said to Joseph in verse 15, I've had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it. So Joseph answered Pharaoh and saying, I'm not going to answer your dream. You left me in prison for all these years. I haven't done anything wrong. And now you want me to come up here and take care of this problem for you? I'm not going to do it. Is that what it says? Well, of course not. Joseph says, Pharaoh, it's not in me. God is the only one that can answer this prayer. Joseph doesn't come in with a disgruntled attitude. He doesn't come in complaining. He doesn't come in with his shoulders slumped and saying, woe is me. He doesn't do any of that. He comes before Pharaoh and he simply says, God can do this. How many of us get so tired and so weary because things don't seem to happen in our way and in our time? And when it finally comes, we've allowed an attitude just to build up within us. And when someone asks us the question, well, we just let them hold it, even though they had nothing to do with it. How many times you called someone on the phone and they're not the recipient of your frustrations, but you let them hold it? That attitude's in our heart because things haven't turned out the way we think they should in our timing. We don't even consider God's timing in this. And it could very well be that God says, I'm teaching you, I'm training you, I'm preparing you for something great in life. Let your attitude be like Christ. And then look at this, what happens in verse 37 through 41 in chapter 41. So Joseph interprets the dream. And the Pharaoh says, this is good stuff. I'm going to follow the advice. And he says, so the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all of his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and as wise as you. You shall be over my house and over all my people, and shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. From 17 to now, Joseph has finally received his advancement. Can you imagine what may have been going on in his mind? For 13 years, he has finally graduated to fulfill his dream. He's finally on the way. And what happens? It says here in these verses, 42 through 46, he receives a ring, fine linen, gold chain, and a new car or a chariot. Because he's finally accomplished. He's finally at the place, and you know the rest of the story, how God has prepared him for that. And even his brothers come and bow down to him and his dead and so forth. Everything that God gave him in this dream, whether Joseph understood it or not, it all came to fruition. When? God's timing. God's timing. What is the dream that God has placed upon your heart? Vague? Not really sure? It was a night like many other nights. Mom glanced at her son, Jimmy, and says, "It's time for you to go to bed." So she said, "You go on to bed and I'll come up and check on you later." So Jimmy went upstairs, and it was a different night. He started getting to bed, and as he did, he looked out the window and he saw the moon. The moon was so full and bright that night. And when his mom came up, she saw him looking out the window, and he said these words to his mom: "One day, I'm going to walk on the moon." Who could have known that that boy who experienced a dream that was planted in his heart that night would survive a near fatal motorcycle accident where nearly every bone in his body was broke? That 32 years later, James Irwin would step onto the moon's surface. Only 12 people to have done so. What's the dream that God has given you? I want to encourage our graduates today, and really all of us, to stay true to God and His Word and His ways. And devote your future to God and let Him reveal to you His dream for you to follow. Jeremiah 29:11 says, God says, "I know the plans I have for you. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." And when all these things begin happening in life, God, you're in control. I'm trusting you. I'm following you. I encourage you to stay faithful and focused on the Lord as you journey through life. Scripture says this: "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and He delights in His way. Though he fall, he shall not utterly be cast down, for the Lord upholds him with His hand." And maybe there's someone here who can relate to what I've shared this morning to our graduates. Maybe you have had a dream in your life and you finally just said, just going to set it aside. Maybe this is the time to say, God, renew that dream in my life. Renew that dream in my life. I've set it aside because I thought all this junk that was happening was you telling me you're not going to do anything. When really it was just events in your life that God says, I'm shaping you through this stuff. I'm shaping you. Maybe this is the day for you to say, God, forgive me for misinterpreting what you were doing in my life. God, help me to redream that dream that you put in my life. Get back on track with God. I gave our graduates a book this morning. Max Lucado is the author of it. And there is a part in that book, guys, that I want to share with you this morning. It's about dreams. And this is just a part of what Max Lucado writes. In the end, you must ask yourself, whose dream I am going to follow? Mine my parents, or God's. God's dreams are always bigger and better and more unbelievable. The purpose of impossible dreams is to show the world that an incredible, unbelievable God still exists, and He works in the lives of people. Wow. Father, thank You for the privilege of challenging Alex and Jeremy and to others who may hear this message today, to know that You love us more than we can even comprehend, that You died on the cross, that we can have life abundantly here and ultimately with You in heaven one day. And knowing, God, that You know us perfectly. Even as Charlene had with the children, You know the hairs upon our head. You know all about us. And You know exactly what's going on in every one of our lives as Your children, for Your Spirit dwells within us. Father, You know those of Your children who You have planted a dream in their heart, maybe as a child, maybe as a young person, maybe even as an adult. You placed a dream in their hearts. Yet they've experienced some things in life that has caused them to get off track. Lord, would You encourage them today, as only You know how to do? Would You remind them through Your Word, by Your Spirit, through circumstances, through godly others, that You are desiring to do the unbelievable in their life for Your glory? And Father, I know that there are those even today that You are calling by Your Spirit to a relationship with You. That's the greatest dream that You have for all of us, that we become Your child and live for You here, to be Your hands and Your feet. So Father, I pray today for Alex, for Jeremy, for Savannah, and for Alex, that God, as they are pursuing their journey in life, I pray they will follow You and fulfill Your dream that You have for them. Father, even as we have a time of invitation this morning, would You speak to the hearts of those here this morning and encourage our hearts as we follow You? For it's in Jesus' name I pray. Would you stand, please?